We're back. Macaulay Culkin took the witness stand today in the Michael Jackson case. Joining me now is Michael Jackson's spokesperson, RAYMONE BAIN. RAYMONE, thanks for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing well. Before I ask you about any specifics, let me just ask you a general question. What's the sense amongst Michael Jackson and his closest friends and relatives about how the trial's going so far?
Well, you know, Dan, Michael feels that his defense team is doing a very good job. They've only been, arguing their case since last Thursday, but Michael has felt very comfortable with Tom Mesereau, and he feels that he has done an exceptional job, even in cross-examining the prosecution witnesses. And I think that he feels comfortable with where they are now, and he's just looking forward to this continuing every day and hoping that the information that is coming out will prove him innocent, because he's maintained his innocence.
Is he preparing a worst case scenario, meaning if he's convicted, how he'll deal with going to prison?
I don't have those conversations with him, Dan, and I wouldn't feel comfortable in having that conversation with any client. Maybe he has had those kinds of discussions with Tom Mesereau, but we're not looking at the downside. I mean, we prefer looking at the cup half full rather than half empty. He has maintained his innocence. We believe he is innocent. He is not a child molester. I think his defense team, and so does he, has done an excellent job thus far, and we believe that he is going to be vindicated of these charges. There's one thing I want to clear up, though. Michael Jackson and Catherine Jackson did not break down in court today. Michael had a little sniffle and he blew his nose, and Catherine was sitting right behind me, and she would whisper a little bit during court, of which we both were admonished for, but she did not break down. She was furious with having seen the documentary yet again, but I don't know where Susan was. I mean, I was absolutely shocked when I heard that, because I wondered if I were sitting in the same court. But believe me, Michael Jackson was not crying, and neither was Mrs. Jackson.
Fair enough. Look, these interpretations are always somewhat subjective, and fair enough for you to clear it up from your perspective. Let me ask you specifically about Macaulay Culkin. Did Michael Jackson call him and say, "Hey, listen, I need you to come in and testify"? Because there was some discussion that he might have been reluctant. He even said he didn't want to testify in the case. Did Michael Jackson have to call him and say, "Hey, I need you, come on and testify, tell the truth"?
I understand from Tom Mesereau he did not. You know, Dan, and you've talked about this on your show. We watch you every day, by the way.
That's good.
There are always rumors. And one day he was testifying, the next day he wasn't. And Tom Mesereau said, "You know, Ramon, what we're going to have to do is just not try to argue this case or give our strategy out every single day." The bottom line is that that's what the media and many of the pundits were saying, but Tom Mesereau never said he was having any problems with bringing Macaulay Culkin in. Now, Macaulay indicated on the stand that he had spoken to Michael a couple of days ago, but no, Michael did not have to plead with Macaulay to come in. Tom Mesereau assures me that was already arranged.
You knew what everyone was saying after the opening statement, that Tom Mesereau was saying Michael Jackson will tell you X, Michael Jackson will tell you Y. Sure sounded like he was saying Michael Jackson's going to testify. You getting the sense that he's going to testify, he wants to testify?
Well, I know that he wants to clear his name. So if it is decided by his team of attorneys that he should, he will. If they decide that it's not a need for him to testify, then he won't. He is going to follow their instructions. They're going to discuss it. Dan, they talk every day. Once they leave court, Michael goes home. He plays with his kids. He talks to them. They're really animated. They are in school during the day, and when he comes in, they're really happy to see him. He spends time with them, he has his dinner, and then he's back on the phone or he's having meetings with his attorneys. So let me tell you, if this is a decision, it's going to be a well thought out one, and I also assure you that Michael Jackson will be very articulate and he will be able to plead his case should they decide that he take the stand.
Final question for you. In the Inquirer's reporting he sold Neverland because he's in such a financial trouble, sold it for $35 million. True?
Not true.
Definitely not true? Absolutely untrue?
Absolutely. I mean, it came as a surprise, and of course last night at about maybe 7 o'clock, I began getting call after call. In about 5 minutes, I had 10 calls, and I'm like, a secret sale? I mean, well, if it's secret, how does the Inquirer know about it? But I have spoken to all of the people that would be involved in making that decision, and let me assure you, that is not the case. It has not been secretly sold.
All right, Ramon, if you could just stick around for a minute. Let me just bring Susan Filan back into the conversation, and criminal defense attorney Daniel Horowitz is with us as well. All right, let's get back to the Macaulay Culkin testimony. Susan, you were there, you watched it. You know, we keep talking about sort of the pluses and minuses of each witness. You know, Mike says, well, you know, there is this sort of grooming testimony that came up that was helpful to the prosecution, but even as the former prosecutor that you are, you'd concede that Macaulay Culkin's testimony was generally pretty helpful to the defense, because in particular he's able to articulate what it's like to be a child star and talk about sort of why Michael Jackson may be a little bit wacky.
I thought he was a good witness, and I thought he did a good job. My question is, did he do too good a job? Because on cross-exam, some of the things that they tried to ask him about, if they were being completely honest, he would have had to concede certain things that really weren't that big a deal, but he did a big dance around them saying, I don't remember, I didn't know I was going to be asked this, I really can't recall. And it started to beg the question, at least for me, is this rehearsed? Is he the perfect entertainer giving the perfect performance of his life? He was very charming, very sweet, easy to listen to. He really sort of brought you in, and you did get a real insight into what their relationship was like, but you still have to scratch your head and say, wait a minute, you slept in bed with him all those times and nothing happened?
But Daniel Horowitz,
if the jury believes that,
Daniel, the defense
hang on, it's a good day for the defense.
But Daniel, the defense is going to concede that Michael Jackson slept in bed with children. I mean, they're not going to dispute it. We've even heard defense witnesses talk about that, right? So if they concede that, I think the advantage of having Macaulay Culkin testify for the defense is, in a way, he kind of puts it in this kind of perspective, if there is a perspective to put it in.
I think so, Dan. I agree with you. It was a devastating set of witnesses, really, young men who theoretically, according to adults, all of whom had an axe to grind and were prosecution witnesses, these young men, these supposed victims, one by one said it didn't happen. Now, Macaulay Culkin said it didn't happen, and Ron Zonin broke down essentially and said, well, you know, maybe while you slept it happened. But that's not the accusation. The accusation was when the French fries were being delivered, Macaulay, who was wide awake, was being molested. The prosecution has essentially conceded that their own witnesses were not telling the truth. And I think it could be a fatal blow.
I don't know if they're saying not telling the truth. But anyway, Mike TAIBBI, go ahead. You wanted to get it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, because the jury is not going to forget, or if they do forget, Tom Mesereau is certainly going to remind them at some point down the line that the only testimony that had Michael Jackson allegedly groping, fondling Macaulay Culkin was by this former self-described major domo, this cook, Philippe Lamarck, who also, the jury will be reminded, talked about selling that story for $500,000 to one of the tabloids. So you have that testimony from that prosecution witness alleging that this young man was molested by Michael Jackson, and the young man himself coming in saying, I think quite believably, I don't know which courtroom Susan Filan was in, but I think quite believably, no, it didn't happen when I was asleep, it didn't happen. So I think that it was a significant last of the triumvirate of witnesses, of alleged victims, to say, I know what people said about us, I can't believe they did, because it didn't happen.
All right. Daniel Horowitz, Susan Filan, Mike TAIBBI. Hey, Ramon, you got to come back on the program, all right? It's nice to have you here.
Definitely, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely.